Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Doan, it's good to have you back. I'd like to start by taking you back to May 31st of 2006, which I'm sure was a memorable day in your life. Do you remember that day?
Yes, it was the day I was sworn in as Administrator of the General Services Administration in the afternoon at the GSA Auditorium.
That's correct. And do you remember the remarks you shared as part of your appointment that day?
In general, but if you would care to share with me the specifics that you want to discuss, I'm happy to hear them.
One of the comments you made during your oath of office ceremony speech was that the Administrator of GSA is an important position of trust, and I value the President's confidence in me. Do you remember that statement?
I believe I would. I'm sure you got that off the website. I'm happy to agree with you on that.
Then you talked about some of the goals that you had set for the agency, and the first goal you mentioned was returning to President Truman's vision for GSA, a clean, honest, and responsive purchasing agency. Do you remember outlining that goal?
Yes.
The reason we find ourselves back here today is to determine whether you violated your position of trust by engaging in retaliation against the very government officials who cooperated with the investigators looking into the allegations of improper conduct by you. And you made reference to the fact that in your statement, which you shared with the committee today, you indicated there is no greater asset at GSA than its employee. That's something you believe in.
And have spoken firmly and acted firmly in that area.
Well, you testified before the committee on March 28th, and I asked you about a political presentation by Karl Rove's deputy, Scott Jennings, that was hosted at the GSA headquarters. And we went through the various PowerPoint slides that had been presented by Mr. Jennings talking about the plans to defend Republican seats and defeat Democrats in 2008. And this committee was concerned because to us it appeared that those presentations violated the Hatch Act, which prohibits political activity on government property. And then since then, we have learned that the White House gave similar presentations throughout federal government agencies. But when I asked you about that presentation, you claimed to have no recollection of it whatsoever. Other GSA employees did remember that presentation, however, and they also remembered how you followed up by asking your employees how you could get GSA to help our candidates, meaning Republican candidates in upcoming elections. When I asked you about this statement, you again claimed to have no recollection. So finally, I asked you about the GSA employees who cooperated with our investigation. All of them told us that you made this statement. When I asked you whether you had any reason to doubt their memory or the credibility of these GSA officials, your answer was no, you did not, because you could not remember the event. Do you remember that discussion we had?
I remember the discussion, maybe not the exact give and take of it.
Those were your answers on March 28th, but after that hearing you testified again before the Office of Special Counsel, and there you gave a very different story. We have the transcript here from your testimony, and it shows that you said that these GSA officials were poor performers, you questioned their memories, and you even suggested that they were not telling the truth to federal investigators. These are extremely serious charges against your colleagues, and we want you to explain them. Let me put up your testimony, if we have that. You stated, and I quote, "There's not a single one of those who did not have somewhere in between a poor to totally inferior performance." So you testified that each of the GSA employees who spoke to the Office of Special Counsel had poor to totally inferior performance. Isn't that true?
I think what is important to understand is the context in which the question was asked to me.
I think it's important for you to answer the question. Isn't that true?
I am trying, Congressman Braley, to answer it to the fullest of the ability, and that is you have to understand the context in which the Office of Special Counsel investigator asked me, could I please speculate on what and why there might be a difference in the recollections of the events of January 26. And I tried to comply as fully and as candidly as I possibly could with their request. And that is the context. And they asked me to speculate, and I did.
Well,
and I should not have.
Doubt very seriously whether this transcript would indicate that the Office of Special Counsel would ask you to speculate on anything. And this committee certainly doesn't want you to speculate. We want you to testify about facts. And my question to you was, isn't it true that you testified that each of these GSA employees who spoke to the Office of Special Counsel had poured a totally inferior performance. That's a yes or no answer.
I appreciate you giving me the chance. First things first, if you would turn your attention to Bates number 385, you will see that indeed the Office of Special Counsel did ask me to speculate. Their exact statement is, I'm asking you to speculate. Now, this is at the end of 9 hours of questioning. If we were to go to the first 20 minutes, we'd also find that they asked me to speculate. Now, I started tallying up how many times they asked me to speculate throughout it, and actually I decided this was not time well spent because there were so many opportunities where they asked me to speculate. Was I wrong to speculate? Absolutely. I should not have done this. We should have focused on facts. The Office of Special Counsel, even if they asked me to speculate, I have to tell you, I really regret doing that. I should not have done that. That was not right of me. I did it because I was trying to be compliant, and I thought that it was going to be fully confidential, but I regret doing it.
After that preface that you read to us was, do you think anyone at this meeting would it make up that you had made these statements? That was the context of the question.
Yes, it was. And if you look at my response, which follows it, you'll see that I did not say that they made it up. What I said is I think it's possible that if a leading question were asked, yes, I think one or two of them may not wish me well. But what we had been talking about for about maybe 20 pages beforehand was the fact that before any of these folks were questioned by any of the different investigators, there had been repeated news articles. It had been in all the trade rags and trade journals. And in addition to that, they had been investigated, or whatever you call it, interviewed by you guys on the committee. And so what I had said is that there is the possibility that there were lots of opportunities for them to hear information, and if someone were then in that context to then be asking a leading question, it's possible that recollections change. I cannot say whether someone misspoke or not. I can only talk about myself, and I cannot account for changes in other people's recollection. That's the context that I was trying to explain, Congressman.
Mr. Braley, I'm going to yield you 3 additional minutes.
Were you represented by counsel at this hearing?
I'm sorry, what?
Were you represented by counsel during this interview?
Oh, during the interview. I had my general counsel, not my general counsel, I had my personal counsel with me.
Did anybody raise an objection to the question when it was posed during the interview?
Well, I think when we start going back...
In this specific question, did anybody raise an objection?
Congressman Braley, no, because in the first hour of the interview, we got into a little bit of a spat because it was perceived that I wasn't complying fully when I tried to give yes and no and avoid these kinds of issues. And so in an attempt to try to be more forthcoming, to show that I was fully open and was trying to comply with the investigation no matter how wild the questions were, and I will say some of these questions got pretty wild.
Well, let's talk about one of the other questions.
I tried to comply.
I don't have that much time, so I'm going to move on to another question. You also made the statement that impugned these officials when you said, I do find it highly disturbing that some of the most vocal proponents or the most articulate speaking out against me are also the people I've either moved on or they are, I don't want to say permanently demoted, but they're kind of, until extensive rehabilitation of their performance occurs, they will not be getting promoted and will not be getting bonuses or special awards or anything of that nature. So in addition to being poor or totally inferior, they're now not going to be getting bonuses, promotions, or awards. And those are very harsh attacks. Don't you agree?
First, there can be no retaliation given that performance reviews were performed well in advance of the January 26th meeting. The two events cannot possibly be connected. The Office of Special Counsel's report is filled with leaps in logic because how can you have performance reviews that happen anytime between September and December, early January, an event, a brown bag lunch that happens January 26th, and then claim that a performance review which was given a month before was in retaliation for an event which happens a month and a half later. It simply is not possible.
You were the one raising concerns about the performance of the witnesses who testified against you, and you were given an opportunity to present evidence to the Office of Special Counsel to back up your claims. They reviewed the evidence you provided and still concluded that your statements were unwarranted in their report to the President. Isn't that true?